Welcome to Sleepy Olympus, where mythical tales turn into gentle bedtime melodies. Relax your body, take a deep breath, and let the gods guide you on a peaceful journey into dreamland.
Hey guys, tonight we are tracing the most laid-back epic in Greek mythology, the unhurried journey of Hermes and his missing sandal. You find yourself standing beside the fleet-footed messenger god, except he's not exactly fleet right now. In fact, he's staring at his bare left foot like someone who just realized they've lost a sock in the dryer. He doesn't panic. He doesn't dash off. He just sighs, shrugs, and says, "Well, it's only a sandal." And you, lucky you, get to follow him. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your location and local time in the comments, because somehow it's always fun knowing who's listening from a rainy midnight in Manchester or a sunny afternoon in Melbourne. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin on Mount Olympus, where Hermes was born, high in the Arcadian mountains. The air is still, carrying the faint scent of pine and goat cheese from a shepherd's camp nearby. Historians still argue whether these pastoral scenes truly match the myths, but if the landscape feels accurate enough to lull you, that's what matters. Hermes, barefoot on one side, tilts his head and mutters, "It fell off," somewhere between delivering a dream to a farmer and convincing a nymph that sandals count as formal wear. You glance around, half expecting divine clues, but all you see is a trail of very confused ants marching across the dirt. Hermes doesn't rush. Instead, he invites you to walk with him, one unhurried step at a time. Hey guys, tonight we are tracing the most laid-back epic in Greek mythology, the unhurried journey of Hermes and his missing sandal. You find yourself standing beside the fleet-footed messenger god, except he's not exactly fleet right now. In fact, he's staring at his bare left foot like someone who just realized they've lost a sock in the dryer. He doesn't panic. He doesn't dash off. He just sighs, shrugs, and says, "Well, it's only a sandal." And you, lucky you, get to follow him. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your location and local time in the comments, because somehow it's always fun knowing who's listening from a rainy midnight in Manchester or a sunny afternoon in Melbourne. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. As you follow him, you notice something about Hermes you didn't expect. Without his usual sprinting pace, he's oddly approachable, like the kind of god who might give you bad advice over coffee. He tells you about how ancient Greeks sometimes left little offerings of sandals at roadside shrines to thank him for safe travels. A quirky custom, he explains, but one that left historians puzzled. Were these votive sandals symbolic, or did people just hate breaking in new footwear? Nobody knows. You imagine dusty little shrines filled with mismatched sandals, a heavenly lost and found curated by Hermes himself. He laughs softly, and you swear the sound makes the cicadas quiet down for a second. Hermes crouches near a patch of thyme, pointing at a faint indentation in the soil. "Sandal print," he whispers, with the reverence of an archaeologist who's found a rare artifact. But then, he leans closer, squints, and sighs, "Nope. That's a goat hoof." He doesn't seem bothered. You're not either. It's hard to care when even time itself feels like it's decided to lean back and tack. The trail grows softer, grass replacing the dusty path. Hermes pauses, closes his eyes, and just listens. You do too. The world is quiet except for a distant breeze and a lazy crow cawing as if it's half asleep. He tells you how, according to one fringe legend, sandals once had their own minor spirit, a daimon who supposedly decided which ones would last a lifetime and which would snap their straps within a week. Hermes chuckles at the thought. "If that's true," he says, "mine probably ran away to vacation in Crete." You find yourself grinning in the dim starlight. There's no rush, no pressure, just you, a god missing one sandal, and a road that seems to stretch as lazily as a cat in the sun. Hermes glances back at you, smirks, and says, "We'll find it, eventually. Probably after a nap." You and Hermes keep walking, the mountain path sloping downward until it smooths out into a meadow that seems to hum with old stories. Dew clings to the grass like tiny pearls, and every step you take feels softer than the last. Hermes doesn't talk much now, he just hums a tune that might be as old as Olympus itself. It's not the triumphant music you'd expect from the god of speed, but something gentler, almost like a lullaby the wind carries for anyone too tired to move quickly. Historians still argue whether Hermes really sang to travelers or if this is just a later poet's embellishment, but as you listen, it's easy to believe. A rabbit darts across the path, pausing to look at Hermes like it recognizes him. He winks at it. You can't help but laugh at how natural this all feels, as if gods and wildlife have a casual, "Hey, how's it going?" agreement. Then, with the same calm certainty as before, Hermes says, "The sandal isn't far now. I can feel it." Of course, you know he might be bluffing, but there's something reassuring in the way he says it, like a parent claiming the car keys must be in the couch cushions, even when they aren't. The meadow narrows, funneling you toward a weathered stone marker. It's carved with faded Greek letters that Hermes traces with his fingertip. Wayfarers used to leave notes here, he explains. Little messages for anyone passing by. Sometimes directions, sometimes a joke. He chuckles, pointing to one inscription that reads, loosely translated, "Zeus still owes me 2 drachma. Tell him I'm not mad, just disappointed." You can't help but wonder how many travelers paused here, laughed, and felt less alone. Hermes kneels, scanning the ground. For a moment, you think he's found the missing sandal, but no, it's a smooth river pebble shaped almost exactly like a sandal strap. He pockets it anyway. "Good luck charm," he says with a grin. This is exactly the sort of easygoing absurdity that makes you forget how long you've been walking. The sun dips lower, spilling gold across the meadow, and Hermes gestures toward the horizon. "We'll rest by the olive grove," he says. You follow him, and for a moment, it feels like stepping into a painting. Crooked olive trees, their trunks knotted with age, and a faint breeze carrying the warm scent of fruit and earth. Hermes tells you how ancient Greeks believed that olive trees whispered to the gods if you listened closely enough. Not very good gossip, he adds dryly. Mostly complaints about dry soil and woodcutters. You sit beneath one of the trees, and Hermes, sandalless, props his feet up on a rock. "One step at a time," he says, as if that's all there is to it. "And maybe, just for tonight, that's enough." You wake, or maybe you never really slept, beneath the olive trees, where Hermes is already tossing pebbles in lazy arcs, each one landing with a satisfying plink against another stone. He nods at you with that effortless kind of grin, the sort that says, "Don't worry, we've got time." And of course, you do. Hermes explains that the sandals trail leads through an old goat path, one barely used since the days when shepherds traded gossip with satyrs over watered-down wine. Historians still argue whether satyrs actually mingled with mortals in everyday life or if they were just a metaphor for rural mischief, but Hermes? He insists he's had to untangle more than one goat from a satyr's ill-conceived prank. As you climb, the ground changes. Dusty earth gives way to patches of thyme and wild mint, their scent sharp but oddly soothing in the fading heat. Hermes points out a crumbled stone wall. "Used to be a roadside shrine," he says, brushing his fingers over its worn surface. He claims it was dedicated to Selenian nymphs who helped lost travelers not panic so much, which might be the most useful divine job description you've ever heard. A pair of shepherd's bells echoes faintly in the distance, though there isn't a single goat in sight. "Old sound," Hermes says, almost wistfully. "Sometimes the hills keep noises the way trees keep rings." You wonder if he's teasing, but he just smirks and keeps walking. You've noticed he does that a lot, dangles these little half-truths like olives on a string, leaving you to decide which ones to swallow. Suddenly, Hermes stops. He crouches and picks something up from the dirt, not the sandal, but a scrap of woven leather, old and cracked. He holds it like a relic, his thumb brushing over it as if it were an old friend. Closer, he murmurs, tucking it into his belt. And though you can't quite explain why, your shoulders loosen, like the world has just become a little simpler. The path leads to a ridge overlooking a quiet valley. Below, scattered huts cling to the landscape, their rooftops blanketed in moss. Hermes gestures lazily toward them. Once, this was a resting place for travelers, he says. No kings, no battles, just warm bread and cool water. There's something almost scandalous about how unimportant it all is, and maybe that's why it feels so comforting. As twilight stretches thin across the sky, Hermes starts humming again. This time, you catch a fragment of words, something about sandals and stars, half joke, half prayer. You don't ask what it means. You just follow, because for reasons you can't quite explain, it's starting to feel like the sandal isn't the only thing being found tonight. Hermes leads you down a slope where the air grows cooler, carrying the faint scent of damp stone and rosemary. Shortcut, he says, though you notice how his shortcuts have a way of feeling longer in the best possible way. The trail hugs the side of the mountain until it opens into a hollow where an abandoned stone bench waits, carved with curling patterns that look suspiciously like sandal straps. Historians still argue whether these benches were roadside rest stops or ceremonial offerings for weary pilgrims. Hermes, of course, insists the answer is yes, which doesn't really help but somehow feels right anyway. He sits, pats the empty space beside him, and pulls out a pouch. Inside are figs, dark and sticky sweet, that he offers you without ceremony. As you eat, he explains that sandals like his were once greased with olive oil not just to keep them supple, but because priests believed it pleased the gods of tread. You're fairly certain he's making that one up, but then again, Hermes has that look that makes every ridiculous fact sound plausible. From the hollow, you can see a faint ribbon of moonlight catching on the ruins of an ancient milestone. Hermes hops up and strolls toward it with casual reverence. This, he says, tapping the stone, was where travelers used to leave offerings. Mostly bread. Occasionally sandals. He pauses. One time, an entire roast lamb. Bit excessive, but hey, it worked. They made it home. You kneel, tracing the worn grooves in the stone, imagining hands from centuries ago doing the same thing. A sudden breeze sighs through the hollow, carrying with it a smell like warm grain and distant smoke, and for just a heartbeat, it feels as if those travelers are still nearby, silent companions on this oddly unhurried quest. Hermes notices your glance and grins. Don't worry, he says. They're friendly. Probably. The path beyond the milestone is overgrown, vines tangling across what used to be cobbled ground. You and Hermes push through, and he hums again, this time a tune suspiciously like an ancient marketplace jingle. Great for sandals, he says, deadpan. 2 drachmas, no haggling. You laugh, softly, but it feels good, and the sound rolls into the night air like it belongs there. At the end of the overgrown track, Hermes crouches low. He presses his palm to the earth, and with a mischievous little nod, he announces, closer. Our sandal wandered this way. Must have been curious. You can't tell if he's joking, but you follow anyway, and for once, the idea that a sandal could have whims of its own doesn't feel strange at all. You follow Hermes into a grove where olive trees lean like drowsy shepherds, their branches knitting a silver canopy against the starlight. The air is hushed here, heavy with the scent of crushed leaves and earth. Hermes pauses beside one tree whose roots look oddly like a pair of crossed feet. Here, he says, tapping the trunk, the first sandal was probably lost. Or dropped during an overly dramatic cartwheel. Historians still argue which. You glance down, half expecting to see leather straps poking from the soil, but all you find is moss, soft and cool under your fingertips. Hermes crouches, tracing the ground with one finger like a detective at a crime scene that no one has cared about in 2,000 years. Funny thing about sandals, he adds. They remember. The dust, the roads, the blisters. They hold it all. It sounds absurd, but in the quiet of this grove, the thought feels oddly comforting, like every worn soul might be a diary nobody bothers to read anymore. He motions you closer and points to a faint trail of indentations in the earth, half-prints, as though left by something that once knew how to walk but decided halfway through that gliding was easier. This, Hermes whispers, is the sign. You lean in, and for a fleeting moment, you're not entirely sure if he's serious or simply enjoying how intently you're squinting at the ground. Of course, he adds, it might also be goat tracks. Or a very indecisive satyr. The grove thickens, branches low enough to brush your shoulders as you follow him. Hermes starts talking about an old ritual from Elis, where travelers offered one sandal to the roadside shrine of Hermes for safe passage. They say, he tells you, those who gave their left sandal always got home faster. The right ones, well, let's just say they took the scenic route. He winks, and somehow the thought of a god deliberately designing scenic delays feels entirely plausible. At the grove's heart, you come upon a peculiar sight, a weathered wooden sign, letters faded but faintly legible. Hermes dusts it off with his sleeve. Lost sandals, it reads in ancient script. Turn back or find a new pair. Hermes laughs, quiet and warm, like someone chuckling at an old inside joke with the universe. We're getting close, he says. Beyond the sign, the grove opens onto a narrow trail lined with stones smoothed by centuries of footsteps, bare feet, sandaled feet, maybe even divine feet. The night air hums with a quiet expectation, and you can't help but feel it too, that peculiar certainty that somewhere up ahead, a single forgotten sandal might be waiting, patient and unbothered by the passing ages. Hermes gestures forward, the tiniest hint of mischief in his grin. Shall we? You follow Hermes down the trail until it narrows into a winding path framed by stones that glow faintly in the moonlight. Old marker stones, Hermes says, brushing one with his fingertips. Laid down back when mortals thought the gods needed road signs. Sweet, isn't it? You smile because the idea of Hermes, fastest of all Olympians, needing a signpost feels like hanging a map in a pigeon's nest. As you walk, the air cools, scented faintly of pine resin and something older, like parchment sealed in a temple for centuries. Hermes points out a mossy alcove just off the path where a small clay offering bowl sits half-buried. Travelers used to leave time here for luck, he explains. Or sandals. Sometimes both. Historians still argue whether the time was for the god or the smell. You imagine a long line of hopeful pilgrims, one sandal missing, holding sprigs of thyme, desperately hedging their bets with divine logistics. The quiet is broken only by the rustle of branches, as if the trees themselves are holding their breath, curious to see if you'll actually find it, Hermes' legendary lost sandal, the one even he never managed to retrieve. The path dips into a small ravine where water trickles lazily over smooth stones, sounding almost like a whisper you can't quite catch. Hermes kneels and points toward the shallows. This, he says with the confidence of someone who could sell clouds to Poseidon, is the place where I definitely might have dropped it. You crouch beside him, scanning the stream. For a fleeting moment, you spot what looks like a strap of leather wedged between two pebbles, but when you reach for it, it's just a bent reed. Hermes pats your shoulder like a coach consoling a rookie. Happens to everyone. Even the gods, he says with mock solemnity. Except Apollo. He'd write an angry ballad about it. Then he starts telling you about an old myth from Arcadia, where locals believed the sound of running water was Hermes laughing, each bubbling stream his chuckle, each ripple a smirk at mortal confusion. You listen closely now, and yes, maybe there is a hint of mischief in that sound, faint but undeniable. Further ahead, you come across an ancient milestone carved with a winged sandal. Hermes dusts it off, squinting. They put these everywhere, he mutters. half the time I didn't even lose anything. He gives the stone a playful nudge with his foot, then glances back at you. But this one feels promising. He gestures to a narrow bridge ahead, just a plank of wood sagging across the ravine. It looks wildly unsafe, but Hermes crosses in a single step and waves you over like it's nothing. When you follow, the bridge creaks but holds. On the other side, a faint trail of footprints leads uphill, fading into the misty glow of the mountain path. Hermes grins and tugs lightly at his empty ankle. "Almost feels like it's pulling me back home," he says. "Come on. We're close enough to smell the leather." You climb the slope beside Hermes, and the mist seems to fold around you like a soft blanket. The air tastes faintly metallic now, as if the mountain itself has secrets it would rather whisper than shout. Hermes slows down, his usual playful speed replaced with something quieter, almost reverent. Ahead, you spot a cluster of weathered stone pillars, half buried in ivy. "Old way stations," Hermes murmurs. "Travelers once stopped here to rest. Some even claimed my sandal rested here too, for a century or two." He winks. "Though between us, it's probably just a very old rumor invented by bored shepherds." Still, you step closer. One pillar bears a strange carving, a winged foot tangled in vines. Hermes brushes away dirt and grins. "That's my kind of graffiti," he says. Historians still argue whether these carvings were devotional symbols or, as one particularly bold scholar suggested, ancient inside jokes between roadside priests. Either way, it's oddly comforting to think someone thought it important enough to etch in stone. A warm breeze drifts past, carrying a faint smell of olive oil and wood smoke. "Someone's cooking nearby," Hermes observes, sniffing the air. "Or I'm just imagining things again. Happens when you've been sandalless too long." You find a small clearing just beyond the pillars. Hermes points to a pile of smooth river stones arranged in a circle. "This was once a traveler's fire pit," he explains. "Back when mortals thought roasting figs in my honor would keep me from pranking them on the road." You crouch down, running your fingers over the stones. They're warm, not from any fire, but from the sun that lingered hours ago. Hermes crouches beside you and picks up a small bronze coin lodged between two rocks. He twirls it idly. "Some things never change," he says. "Mortals still hope a coin will buy them luck. Me? I'd take a good pair of sandals over drachma any day." He flips the coin in the air, and it lands squarely in your palm. "For the road," he says, as if gifting you an ancient secret. You tuck it away, oddly reassured, like carrying it might actually matter. Beyond the clearing, the path narrows again, curling around a ledge where the mountain falls away into a dark, velvety void. Below, scattered lantern lights from distant villages flicker like grounded stars. Hermes gestures toward them. "Mortals," he says, still trudging home with tired feet. "You have to admire their persistence." He looks down at his bare ankle, smirks, and then points to a faint track winding higher into the rocks. "This is it. The trail that leads to where I last saw it. Unless," he adds slyly, "the sandal decided to walk off by itself. Entirely possible. It was an adventurous sandal." You laugh softly, but as you follow him upward, you can't help but glance back at the carved pillars and the quiet fire circle. Something about them feels like a promise, half memory, half myth, waiting for you at the top of the trail. The path above the ledge is narrow, but Hermes moves like he's done this climb 1,000 times, barefoot or not. The mountain air grows cooler, carrying the scent of wild thyme and the faintest trace of salt from the distant sea. "You'd think a missing sandal wouldn't take me this far," Hermes mutters, shaking his head. "But you know how it is with lost things. They always pick the most inconvenient places to hide." You chuckle softly, the sound swallowed by the night air. Overhead, constellations sharpen against the sky. Hermes points to one, a faint cluster you barely notice. "That one?" he says. Mortals call it the sandal of the messenger. Not very creative, but they get points for accuracy. Historians still argue whether this star pattern was actually Hermes' invention or merely a shepherd's late-night attempt at stargazing poetry. Hermes grins either way, clearly enjoying the myth whether it's true or not. As you climb, you notice a faint trail of broken reeds and crushed herbs leading ahead, as if something, or someone, has been here recently. Hermes raises an eyebrow. See? It has a sense of humor. My sandal is out there, taunting me with breadcrumbs like a bored trickster. He leans in conspiratorially. Honestly, I respect it. The trail suddenly widens into a plateau covered with low, mossy stones. In the center stands an altar, cracked and crooked, but unmistakable. Hermes approaches it slowly, brushing dust from its surface with the casual tenderness of someone greeting an old friend. Mortals once left offerings here, he says. Mostly honey cakes. Occasionally, a goat. Once, and I still don't know why, an entire basket of garlic. He smirks. The sandal loved this spot. Or maybe I did. Hard to tell. He steps back, letting you take it in. The altar is carved with looping patterns, some resembling wings, others spirals that look almost hypnotic in the moonlight. You trace one spiral with your fingertip and feel a shiver, not fear, but the quiet sense that you are brushing against something impossibly old. Hermes crouches and finds a tiny clay bead tucked into a crack of the altar. He holds it up for you. Temple trinket, he explains. Could be from 500 years ago, or 5 minutes. Time gets a little fuzzy on this mountain. He pockets it with a wink. From the plateau's edge, the view stretches endlessly, jagged peaks, dark valleys, and far beyond, the silver line of the sea. Hermes leans against a boulder, looking out. If I were a sandal, he says thoughtfully, I'd come here just to feel taller than Zeus. He laughs quietly, the sound oddly comforting in the emptiness. A wind rises, playful and persistent, tugging at your clothes. For a moment, it almost feels like invisible hands nudging you forward. Hermes notices too. Friendly breeze, he says. Might be Boreas stretching his legs. Or just the mountain telling us to keep going. You take one last look at the altar, then follow Hermes toward a narrow path leading even higher. Your legs ache, but there's a strange calm in the climb, as if each step draws you deeper into a story you didn't know you were part of. You follow Hermes up the winding path until the rocks give way to a grove of silver-leafed trees. Their branches shimmer faintly, even without moonlight, as if they've been dipped in stardust. Sacred olives, Hermes whispers. Not the kind you eat, unless you enjoy tasting disappointment. You laugh softly, but your voice feels small in this place. A faint rustling sound drifts from deeper in the grove. Hermes tilts his head. Ah, he says, our first audience. From behind the trunks, figures emerge, dryads, their forms blending with the bark and leaves until they step fully into view. They look at Hermes with something between amusement and recognition. One of them, her hair tangled with ivy, waves at him lazily, as though he were a neighbor popping by for sugar. Hermes bows with mock formality. Ladies, he says, we're just passing through. Well, passing through and maybe chasing a sandal with an attitude problem. The dryads murmur among themselves, their voices like wind through branches. One of them points toward a craggy path, smirking. Hermes nods. See? Even the trees gossip about me. Historians still argue whether these encounters are metaphor or memory, but here, the debate doesn't matter. As you walk, the grove sounds fade, replaced by the crunch of loose stones underfoot. Hermes hums a tune, soft, lilting, almost like a lullaby. He explains, it's an old shepherd song. Supposed to keep wolves away. Or sandals, if they're feeling particularly rebellious. He chuckles at his own joke. Halfway up the next incline, Hermes pauses beside a peculiar stone marker. Its surface is etched with strange symbols, spirals and wing-like patterns you've seen before, only these glow faintly in the dim light. Hermes brushes his fingers across it. Travelers used to leave these to mark safe paths. Or, he adds with a grin, to confuse anyone who annoyed them. He crouches and finds a small scrap of leather wedged in a crack at the base. He holds it up for you. See that? Heel strap. We're on the right track. He pockets it like it's a trophy, clearly savoring every small victory. If the sandal left this, he says, it's practically inviting us to follow. The path narrows again until you're walking single file. The air here feels sharper, cooler, carrying the scent of snow from peaks above. Hermes glances at you. Not cold, are you? He asks. If you are, just imagine you're sitting in a sunlit agora eating figs. Works every time. Ahead, a faint light flickers between two boulders. It's not fire, too steady for that, but a pale glow, like trapped moonlight. Hermes grins. Ah, I know that glow. That's a marker from one of my old haunts. You're going to love this. And with that, he steps forward, guiding you toward a hidden alcove where something, perhaps sandal, perhaps stranger, waits, tucked away in the mountain's quiet heart. You follow Hermes into the alcove, ducking beneath a low arch of stone. Inside, the walls shimmer faintly as if dusted with powdered pearl. Hermes taps the rock with his knuckle, and the sound echoes like distant bells. Old smugglers used this cave, he says, back when even gods liked a little side hustle. He winks. In the center of the cavern sits a circular pool of water so still it looks like polished glass. At first, you expect to see only your reflection, but instead, faint shapes ripple beneath the surface, mountains, valleys, and tiny figures in motion. A map, Hermes whispers, crouching beside it. The lazy kind. Shows you where you should go instead of letting you figure it out yourself. Mortals used to love it. He dips his finger into the pool, and the surface trembles. One glowing trail appears, winding upward toward a ridge, ending in a single, floating image, a sandal with golden wings. Hermes smirks. Finally. Although, he leans closer. Looks like it's enjoying itself at a nymph's tea party. Of course it is. As Hermes straightens, he gestures for you to follow him out of the cave. The night air outside feels sharper now, laced with pine and frost. The path is narrow but steady, the stones almost humming beneath your feet. Hermes explains, this trail's been walked by messengers, pilgrims, and the occasional lost goat since before your world had calendars. He adds with a chuckle, historians still argue whether these paths were planned or simply happened, like my brother Apollo's mood swings. The sound of your laughter fades into the mountains, mingling with the whisper of the wind. Far above, you catch a glimpse of movement, a faint silhouette of something darting between peaks, wings glinting like starlight. Hermes shades his eyes. Well, he says with mock solemnity, either that's your sandal, or Zeus is trying out a new hobby. You climb higher, the horizon unfolding into an endless sea of starlit ridges. Hermes, surprisingly unbothered by the effort, walks backward for a few steps, grinning. This part's my favorite, he says. The silence up here? It's loud enough to drown out every noisy thought you brought with you. You stop for a moment, letting it wash over you, the quiet so deep you can almost hear the stars hum. Hermes leans close and whispers, don't get too dreamy. We've still got a sandal to catch, and trust me, it's faster than it looks. Ahead, a faint path curves toward a ridge crowned with strange, glowing stones. Hermes claps his hands. Ah. A shortcut. And I promise, this one's only mildly cursed. You step onto the ridge, the glowing stones casting a pale blue shimmer that feels oddly welcoming. Hermes crouches beside one of them, tapping it gently with his knuckles. These, he says, are moonstones. Supposedly, they were left behind by Selene herself. Or maybe they're just very shiny rocks. Scholars still debate it, which is academic speak for, will never agree. As you walk between them, you notice how the stones hum softly, a sound somewhere between wind chimes and a purring cat. Hermes grins. They like you. That's good. They've been known to, throw tantrums. He gestures vaguely at a scorched patch of earth, as if to prove the point. Then, with an exaggerated flourish, Hermes points ahead. There. Look close. Sure enough, perched on a rock at the far end of the ridge, you spotted Hermes' sandal, its tiny golden wings twitching like a restless sparrow. For an inanimate object, it looks remarkably smug. Hermes sighs dramatically. I swear, that sandal has a sense of humor. Probably got it from me. He edges closer, keeping his voice low, as if afraid it might spook the thing. You follow suit, though you can't help but glance around, because what if it just flies off again? The sandal flutters once, lazily, almost taunting. Hermes mutters under his breath, this is why I should have invented self-tying laces instead. He reaches out, hands steady, but the sandal darts upward at the last second, zipping into the thin mountain air. Hermes groans. Fine. You want to play chase? We'll play chase. He gestures for you to follow, and just like that, you're sprinting across the ridge, moonstones flashing beneath your feet, Hermes laughing like this is the best game he's had in centuries. The chase carries you down into a winding pass where old pines stand like sentinels. The sandal hovers just out of reach, wings buzzing in quick bursts, as though daring Hermes to catch it. You know, Hermes says between breaths, ancient poets used to write about me delivering dreams. I didn't think one of those dreams would involve cardio. You laugh despite yourself, the sound echoing off the cliffs. And maybe it's the altitude, or the absurdity, but everything feels lighter up here. Hermes slows suddenly, holding up a hand. Wait, he says. The sandal has stopped ahead, hovering over a strange circle of stones. Hermes tilts his head. Ah. Of course. It's heading for the Whispering Gate. Should have guessed. You step into the circle with Hermes, the air immediately cooler, carrying a faint scent of lavender and old parchment. The stones here aren't moonstones, they're darker, almost black, with faint carvings that shimmer when you blink. Hermes taps one with his finger and winces. Memory stones, he explains. They remember everything that happens inside the circle. You glance at him. Everything? He nods, eyes narrowing at the sandal, which now bobs in the center like it's waiting for applause. Including humiliating defeats. Which is why I can't just miss twice. The sandal hovers a little higher, as if understanding the moment's tension. For a brief second, you wonder if it's sentient. It almost seems like it's mocking Hermes, playing an endless game of tag with him. Hermes, in his usual fashion, doesn't seem fazed at all. He adjusts his sandals, which are much more grounded, with a calm air of casual confidence. He turns back to you, the mischievous gleam in his eyes replaced by a serious glint. The moment is almost cinematic, the two of you standing in the middle of an ancient circle of stones, surrounded by the sounds of the wilderness, and the sense that something extraordinary is about to unfold. Hermes seems to share this feeling, his usual light-hearted demeanor faltering just enough to show that he's aware of the stakes. Alright, let's do this properly, he says with a sudden burst of determination. He steps forward carefully, eyes fixed on the hovering sandal, his fingers twitching as if ready to spring into action at the slightest provocation. As he moves, the stones beneath his feet hum with a quiet resonance, as if they're acknowledging his presence. You can't help but wonder if the stones, like the sandal, hold some deeper, ancient magic. Stay sharp, Hermes warns you. These stones have memories, and they'll remember us long after we've gone. The closer he gets, the more the air seems to crackle with energy. You can almost hear the soft whispers of forgotten voices, ancient beings that might have once walked this very ground. It's a strange sensation, this mixture of awe and unease. You find yourself drawn to the stones, but you're not sure if it's the magic or the mounting tension that keeps you from stepping any closer. Hermes doesn't hesitate. With a swift movement, he reaches out toward the sandal. It's just within arm's reach now, its golden wings fluttering lightly as though it's waiting for him to make the first move. Hermes stops, though, his hand just an inch away. He glances back at you with a smirk. You ever notice how the hardest part isn't the chase, he muses, his voice lowering to a near whisper. It's the moment just before you catch it, the moment when everything seems to hold its breath, like the whole world is waiting for you to make your move. The sandal twitches, and you're almost certain it senses Hermes' hesitation. There's a brief, unsettling pause, as if both Hermes and the sandal are playing a game with the very fabric of time. Hermes, with a sudden shift in his posture, lunges forward, his fingers grazing the edges of the sandal. It hovers just out of his reach, the golden wings fluttering with a teasing rhythm. For a moment, you think he's finally going to catch it, but instead, with a sudden gust of wind, the sandal zips upward, darting away into the vast expanse of the cavernous space. You both watch, momentarily stunned by the speed. Hermes grins, but there's an edge of frustration in his eyes. Well, that's new, he mutters, wiping his hand across his face. It's playing games now. He takes a deep breath and motions for you to follow. Come on. If it's going to be like that, we'll have to outsmart it. With the chase resumed, you and Hermes dash through the cavern, your feet echoing against the cool stone floor. The air seems thick with the scent of ancient dust, and the light from the glowing crystals casts strange, flickering shadows across the walls. The further you go, the more the sandal seems to play with you both, darting just beyond your reach before veering off in another direction. As you follow, the winding paths become more treacherous. The walls narrow, and the crystal veins running through them cast an eerie, pulsating light. The sound of your footsteps grows muffled, swallowed by the sheer vastness of the cave. You realize that in this labyrinth of rock and light, finding the sandal is going to be far more difficult than you had first imagined. Hermes, for his part, remains unfazed. He hums a soft tune, clearly enjoying the challenge. You know, he says with a chuckle, ancient poets used to say that the hardest part of any journey is not the destination, but the moment you're stuck somewhere in the middle, with no way out. You can't help but laugh, despite the situation. The absurdity of chasing a flying sandal through a dark cavern seems to lift the tension, even if only for a moment. You steal a glance at Hermes, whose usual confidence seems to have returned. The two of you round a corner, and the sandal's golden wings flash ahead. It's almost as if it's toying with you, waiting to see if you can catch up. You feel a mix of exhilaration and impatience, unsure whether you're chasing the sandal or being chased by it. The chase continues, but something changes. There's an unsettling quiet now, the echoing footsteps have stopped, and the walls of the cave seem to close in around you. Ahead, the sandal hovers in place, as though waiting for something. Hermes slows his pace, his eyes narrowing in concentration. This is it, he murmurs, his voice low. This is where it gets tricky. You follow suit, stepping carefully as you approach the hovering sandal. The crystal veins in the walls seem to pulse with energy, and you feel the ground shift beneath your feet, as if the cavern itself is alive. There's a hum in the air, a sense that something ancient and powerful is watching. Hermes gestures for you to stop. I think we've reached the heart of the cave, he whispers. And I don't think we're alone. Just then, a low rumbling sound echoes through the cave, and the walls tremble slightly. You glance nervously around, unsure what to expect next. As the rumbling grows louder, the walls of the cavern seem to hum in response, vibrating with a deep, resonating frequency that makes the air feel thick and heavy. You glance at Hermes, whose usual calm demeanor seems to have shifted. There's a tension in his posture now, something you haven't seen before. What's happening, you ask, your voice low, unsure if you even want to know the answer. Hermes doesn't immediately respond, his eyes scanning the shadows, as though waiting for something to emerge. "We've disturbed something," he says finally, his voice quieter than before. "Something ancient. These caves aren't just for storage or sanctuary. They were built to guard something powerful." The ground beneath your feet trembles once more, and you feel a deep rumble travel up through your boots. The golden wings of the sandal flicker in the distance, but it's now hovering directly over a large, glowing rune in the center of the cave. Hermes steps closer to the rune, but the sandal darts to the side, avoiding his grasp. It knows we're here. And it doesn't want to be caught. The air becomes thick with a strange, almost magnetic energy as you and Hermes approach the center of the cave. The walls seem to close in, and the light from the glowing crystals grows dimmer. The only source of light now is the strange, pulsing glow emanating from the rune at the center. Hermes steps carefully, his fingers twitching as if he's preparing to spring into action. "You ever feel like we're being watched?" he murmurs. The sensation is impossible to ignore. You feel a presence in the air, something older than time itself, like an ancient being observing every move you make. The hairs on the back of your neck stand on end, and you instinctively glance over your shoulder, half expecting to see something lurking in the shadows. The sandal hovers just beyond reach, its golden wings now glowing brighter as it flits around the rune. Each time it moves, the rune seems to pulse with energy, as though it's reacting to the sandal's presence. Hermes pauses, his face clouded with concern. This isn't just a game anymore. The sandal is part of something bigger. And if we're not careful, we might unleash something we can't control. The intensity of the moment grows, the air thick with the weight of the unknown. Hermes edges closer to the rune, his movements slow and deliberate, as though testing the waters. The sandal circles above them, its golden wings cutting through the air in delicate arcs. There's a strange harmony between the two, an unspoken connection that seems to draw them together. "You think it's leading us to something?" you ask, your voice barely above a whisper. Hermes doesn't respond immediately. Instead, he watches the sandal, his eyes narrowed. The flickering light from the rune illuminates his face, casting shadows across his features, making him look older than usual, as though the weight of the situation is starting to sink in. "I don't know," he says at last, his voice low. "But I'm about to find out." With a sudden motion, Hermes steps forward and places his hand on the glowing rune. The moment his skin touches the stone, the air shudders, and the ground beneath your feet shifts. The entire cavern seems to come alive, the walls vibrating with an ancient, powerful force. The sandal pauses in midair, its wings fluttering rapidly, almost as though it's reacting to the change in the atmosphere. The cavern trembles violently as Hermes's hand makes contact with the glowing rune. For a split second, everything stops, the sandal hovers in midair, its wings frozen, and the humming energy around you fades into an eerie silence. You hold your breath, unsure of what will happen next, as if the whole cave is holding its own breath. Then, with a low, rumbling groan, the stone beneath you begins to crack. The floor splits, and a deep fissure opens up, sending a tremor through the air. The rune flares brightly for a moment, its light so intense that it almost blinds you. The sandals shimmer and tremble, almost as if reacting to the growing force. Hermes stumbles back, eyes wide, but there's a spark of determination in his expression. "We've triggered something," he says, the urgency in his voice unmistakable. "Something ancient, and powerful." You can't help but glance around, feeling the pressure of the air growing heavier with each passing second. The very walls of the cave seem to be closing in, as if the cavern is waking up from a long slumber, and it doesn't appreciate the disturbance. The sandal, now vibrating uncontrollably, shoots off toward the opening of the fissure. It hovers at the edge, its wings flapping with intense urgency. You exchange a glance with Hermes, who doesn't hesitate for a moment. "Let's move." Hermes shouts, motioning for you to follow as he dashes toward the widening crack in the stone. You follow close behind, your heart pounding in your chest. The ground continues to shake, and the air seems to hum with increasing intensity. The sandal, now fully out of control, zips back and forth in front of you, taunting you like it knows that you are both at its mercy. You can almost feel the energy in the air swirling around it, as though it's the key to unlocking something much bigger, something you're not sure you're ready to face. As you sprint toward the fissure, Hermes' words echo in your mind. This cave, it's not just a hiding place. It's a prison. You look back at him, confused. A prison for what? Before he can answer, the ground trembles again, and a deep growl rises from the depths of the fissure. It's not a natural sound, it's something ancient, almost alive. The air becomes thick with the smell of earth and sulfur as if the very bowels of the mountain are awakening. The fissure widens before you, revealing a deep, shadowy abyss. The light from the glowing rune is now replaced by the pulsing energy that seems to pour out from the cracks in the stone, casting long shadows across the cavern floor. The sandal, now seeming to sense the danger, hovers just above the abyss. Its golden wings beat faster, fluttering frantically as if it's trying to resist being drawn into the darkness below. You watch helplessly as it hovers closer to the edge. "Don't!" Hermes shouts, his voice desperate now. It's not ready yet. But it's too late. With a final, powerful beat of its wings, the sandal dives into the abyss, disappearing into the darkness. The glow from the fissure intensifies, and you can feel a wave of heat wash over you. The ground beneath your feet shifts again, and you stumble forward, catching yourself just in time. For a moment, there's nothing but silence. The sandal is gone, swallowed by the abyss, and the energy that was swirling around the cave seems to dissipate. But you know this isn't over. The cavern, now eerily still, seems to be waiting for something, waiting for the next chapter in this strange and ancient game. Hermes turns to you, his face grave. This is just the beginning.
Enjoy the mysterious tales, step onto the peak of Mount Olympus, and experience sleep like a god in a realm of legends and immortality.